So what is it that we're trying to protect here on Earth? Well, simply, it's biodiversity. And this one word really encapsulates all of Earth. So what does this word mean? Well, you're probably familiar with diversity. You talk about it a lot in school. We talk about it a lot with people. And bio refers to life, just like biology. So it's really the diversity of life. That's what biodiversity is. That bio is short for biological. So not only are we interested, say, in human diversity, but really the diversity of animals, plants, bacteria, really everything that's alive. Now we can break biodiversity down into three major categories. I'll talk about each of these individually in just a moment. But the first one is genetic biodiversity. So this is talking within a single population and looking at the genetics of that population. For humans, you could say, the diversity of skin color, that's genetic. We can go further up and look at species diversity. This is typically what people think of when we think of biodiversity. What species are out there? How many of them do we have? And then finally, we also have ecosystem biodiversity. So it's a very big difference looking at an aquatic ecosystem versus a desert versus a tropical rainforest. So we'll talk about each of these individually, starting with genetic biodiversity. So the genetic biodiversity is just looking at the different genetic material in a population. So for example, in this picture, we have two mice. These mice are the same species but have different fur colors. And if you have high genetic biodiversity, in this case, it would mean you have a high genetic variation in fur color. Not every single mouse is 100% tan, and they're not all the same shade of tan. Some are darker, some are lighter, some are brown instead. Some might have white fur, some might have black fur. So a huge diversity in that fur color trait. Now, why does this matter? Why does this kind of biodiversity matter? Well, one, it increases stability of that population, making it more likely to survive. Well, how is it more likely to survive? Look at just this picture itself. This picture has two different habitats in it. We have this nice sandy habitat, and we have this darker habitat in the background. Well, by having mice with many different colors, you're allowing this population to expand over many areas across this landscape, and having that population grow in a wide area. If this sand population was to all of a sudden get swept away and reveal dark stone underneath, well, there's individuals with dark fur that would blend in just fine and they would survive. But if all the mice were this light color and all of that sand goes away, well, now you're going to be super exposed to predators, and you don't blend in, so the entire population would get consumed in that case. But let me talk about some more real life examples. One thing that can happen and has happened is a bottleneck effect. And what this does is it actually declines genetic diversity. So this is showing a graph looking at time, and here's a pretty large population. Something happens, usually some sort of natural disaster, that might kill off a good proportion of this population. Now, we don't have that many individuals left, meaning we don't have that many genes. These individuals have to breed with one another. Well, that can cause some issues. Sometimes it'll just end up leading to their extinction because there's not enough genes to reproduce. Sometimes, if there is enough genes and enough variation in that population, they can recover, but it's rarer, it's harder. An example of a species that has experienced this is the cheetah, so the fastest land mammal on Earth. About 10,000 years ago, the cheetah went through a bottleneck effect. That 10,000 years ago, this event was the last ice age. It obviously made their habitat much colder. Finding food was a lot harder. They actually got down to a population of around 9 individuals. As you probably know, cheetahs are endangered today. Well, it's because of this bottleneck effect. So because there were so few individuals sharing, this DNA, but they had to inbreed a lot, most of the cheetahs alive today, so all of them, no matter where they are in the world, are about 99% identical, which is about as identical twins are. So incredibly similar. And they're breeding with each other. They're breeding with their twin. This has caused a lot of reproductive failure and declines in the cheetahs. Compared to other feline species such as lions and tigers, panthers, they only have about 10% of the sperm as compared to those other species. So already they're not making that much sperm. Of that sperm, about 70% of it isn't even work right. It's, maybe the tail, isn't that strong. Maybe the enzymes that break down the egg aren't that strong. So 70% of that reduced sperm doesn't even work. So you can see that they're having such a hard time reproducing because their body is trying to prevent it. Their body's like, I've been inbred so many times, the genes I have are not working for me anymore. So, it's possible we may face a cheetah extinction in our lifetime because of this lack of genetic biodiversity. Another example that affected humans a couple centuries ago in the 1800s was the Great Potato Famine, or the potato blight that occurred in Ireland. Potatoes are a really huge staple of their diet. And especially a couple centuries ago when we didn't really have the kind of mechanistic farming we have today, you're relying on homegrown farms to provide for the country. So what happened during this is that the potatoes being grown got diseased, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But these diseased potatoes, again, major staple of the country, led to about 1 million people starving to death, I should say. And then about another 1 million people emigrated because of this lack of food. So about 1/4 of the total population either left the country or died due to this famine. That's an incredibly huge proportion of the population. But why did that happen in the first place? Well, they didn't have genetically diverse potatoes. They were growing, so here at the bottom, they were growing the same type of potato, exact same type, all genetically similar. Imagine potatoes being brothers and sisters with one another, which does happen in plants, but they're all similar to one another. Well, if one gets sick, they're all going to get sick because they have all the same genetics. So if your sister's going to get the flu, more than likely you're going to get the flu. One, you live with your sister, and you have pretty similar genetics. So if she's going to get it, you're probably going to get it too. Same thing with these potatoes. One potato got this blight, got this disease, and all the potatoes in that field also got that disease, killing so many of the potatoes that really affected the people. What they do now, and even we, like here in the United States with our crops, we try to grow a diversity of crops. Not necessarily diverse potatoes, we're growing all sorts of potatoes in the same field, but not all clones of one another. We're growing like a potato that we bought here in Maryland, we're buying a potato that we bought in Idaho, like all these different strains. It's still a white bacon potato, but they're not all 100% the same. They have a lot of diversity. So if one gets sick, which it still might happen, that's not a guarantee the rest will get sick. Some of these other strains might actually be resilient to it. Your cousins might get sick and you might be around them, but you have genes that are actually helping you to fight off whatever that disease or illness is. And so this actually changed agriculture, not just in Ireland, but really around the world, seeing the effects of lacking in that genetic biodiversity.